Malu, let's report Manuia to your listeners today.
Yeah, how are you this morning?
Yeah, Manuia Whawhai. It's a bit cold here in Wellington, but I'm sure it's like that all over New Zealand at the moment.
Yeah, okay. Lele, ole ma wale a malanga ia lo fiong foi manisha la malanga New Zealand, le malo New Zealand, le UN and USA. Are you able to tell us about what is ole ale au tuol fenga malanga fabul mone?
And so on Asakungai, I will be going with the Speaker of our House,
Yeah.
the Right Honourable Jerry Brownlee, to the United States. So we will spend some time in New York first.
Yeah.
There we will speak to our permanent ambassador to the United Nations. So we will spend some time understanding, what is happening in the world, what is the UN seeing, and what is the UN doing around, some of the tensions that we're seeing
Right.
across the world. For example, with Israel, Iran, and what is happening in the Ukraine and Russia, etc. We'll also then spend some time and travel to Washington, D.C. There we will spend time with Congress.
Yeah.
So part of parliaments is we have connections with other parliaments across the world, or in this case, Congress.
Yeah.
So that is one of the houses of the United States government, or administration, should I say. So we will spend some time there just speaking to other members of Congress, both Republican and Democrat. And it's a really important time for us to make sure we have strong connections with the US and their lawmakers.
Talking about connection with the US, you are the spokesperson for finance for New Zealand. For any impact of the tariffs by Donald Trump? New Zealand.
So there is a 10% tariff that's been put on New Zealand goods going into the US. The United States is New Zealand's second largest export market, so China, the US, and Australia. And so it's really important that we stay very connected to the US lawmakers, just to ensure they understand the impacts on our exporters. So, for example, meat. We export a lot of meat to the US. So those tariffs will have an impact on our exporters, but also that's balanced against, at the moment, our New Zealand dollar, which is, clearly will buffer some of those cost increases for our exporters. But ultimately, this trip is very important to ensure that as a parliament, we keep those conversations open.
Pesetatamalelagi, let's talk about Kiwi Saver. A few weeks back, an announcement at Malu, swing out Kiwi Saver. La afale contribution at Malu, more tangata for lefting wenga. What's your take on this?
So those announcements to the government contribution being cut in half were made at budget. So the budget already made Pacific Women's pay less because those pay equity claims that the government cut. So 33 claims, particularly in areas where a lot of our Pacific women work in. So, for example, care and support workers. And so this just builds on what we believe is the national-led government just not helping everyday Kiwis. So now they're making it harder for people to save for their retirement, or they're going to have less in their retirement when they go to retire. Budgets are always about choices. You can build for the future or you can cut. The national government has decided to cut and take money from women's pay and also from Kiwi Saver retirement funds. So the Labour Party, our calculations is that if you entered into Kiwi Saver when you were 18, the reduction in the government contribution means you've got $66,000. That's $66,000 you could have had if that contribution was at the same level it was before they cut it in half.
Yeah, Pesetatamalelagi, for the opportunity for the young generations, like you said 18 years, for Kiwi Saver scheme. Do you think that's a better idea for the younger generation?
So not for the younger generation, because again, it's less money in their pocket, but also for the older generation. You can still be working and receiving the government contribution if you meet the minimum level. But many in our Pacific communities are already finding it hard to deal with the cost of living right now, and then just to take more money away from their retirement scheme when they do go to retire, whether that's 5 years' time, a year's time, or and when you're 18 in many decades' time. It's just it's quite cruel
Yeah. Okay, Pesetatamalelagi, let's talk about cost of living and inequality. What are Labour's top priorities for addressing the rising cost of living?
It's absolutely the cost of living is one of our number one priorities, as
Right.
well as around jobs, health, and homes.
Yeah.
The government got elected on the promise that they were going to get New Zealand back on track, but I don't know if people feel better because from the people I'm talking to, they're not feeling better. You know, their food prices have gone up annually by 4%.
Yeah.
If you own a home, your rates have gone up considerably in the
Yeah.
last 2 years.
Yeah.
Power prices are still going up. Insurance premiums are still going up. You're now having to pay a bit more if you own a business, and you
Yeah.
have to pay for ACC. So it's a really tough time for our communities out there. For Labor, as we develop our policy for the next election,
Yeah.
18 months, we will come out with all the different policies we believe would address the cost of living
Yeah.
crisis. But the problem is that the National Party have taken so much away from families and have
Right.
not given them anything with the other hand.
And so, how would you ensure that economic growth translate into real improvements for working families?
So economic growth is another word for it is productivity. That's basically trying to ensure that businesses are producing more goods and services. And for us as the Labor Party, it's really important that our employees, that our workers are being remunerated fairly for what they need to do. So for Labor, it's really important that when it comes to economic growth or productivity, that it's shared by everybody, not just by a few.
Yeah.
So, for example, as I said before, the budget is about choices.
Yeah.
The government decided to give the gas industry a $200 million tax cut.
Yeah.
They decided to give large foreign international tech companies a really large tax cut. They decided to give landlords a tax cut. Yet at the same time, they took away free transport for our children for under 25s. The school lunch program is definitely not delivering the same level that it was. And a lot of people lost their jobs because a lot of them were hired locally. They were local workers and they've centralised it. So it's for us getting that balance right where we can support families and target the support to those that need it the most rather than those that don't.
Okay, Pesetatamalelagi, let me ask you, Labour has criticised the current government budget as a direct assault on New Zealand values. What specific alternatives would Labour propose?
So we are going through that policy process again with the election in 18 months. There's another budget to come through. We will be really clear to the people of New Zealand what Labour will offer as the alternative. But right here, right now in opposition, our job is to show New Zealand the cruel decisions that this government is making. So when we say that the budget was an assault on New Zealand values, what we were saying is the cutting of those pay equity claims to save $13 billion. That's a lot of money, close to $13 billion. That's money that would have gone directly to the hands of low-paid workers who are mainly women. And what it says to these women and to their daughters and their children and their nieces and their families that their contribution to the economy is not as important as a man's is. So that's not something that we as New Zealand, as a country and as Labour, we agree with.
Right. Okay, Pesetatamalelagi, the other thing, Labour previously proposed a 39% top tax rate for income over $180,000. Would you revisit or expand this policy?
That's still in.
Yeah.
So the national government have not reversed it. Okay. And actually it brings in quite a bit of revenue for the national government. So they've kept it in the same way that we would keep it in as well.
Okay. How do you plan for, to ensure multinational corporations pay their fair share of tax?
So that was ultimately the changes that the government made to save about $500 million in this budget. That legislation was actually legislation that I brought in as the Minister of Revenue in 2023. And that was ultimately setting a baseline tax that if you're a foreign international company and you provide services here in New Zealand, for example, social media companies, etc., then we want to ensure that, like other companies, you pay your fair share of tax. You're getting money from New Zealand, so we ask that you contribute to the country in which you are operating your business. It was quite clear for us, that was our position. That's why we put that legislation in. So the government coming and taking it away for us just shows that they're more than happy to tax our New Zealand companies, but not foreign-owned ones.
Malu, thank you so much. Taeao, my last question before I let you go. You're a Labour first female finance spokesperson. How do you plan to make your mark in this role?
It's important for me to remember where I've come from.
Yeah.
I am a Samoan woman before I am a member of parliament.
Right.
But those values that us as a Samoan community value so much around looking after our families, looking after our children, looking after our elderly, I will ensure that the decisions I made are rooted in those very strong values of looking after our families and communities. So, because if I don't, my aunties who are watching and listening to this interview, they'll make sure that I don't forget that I am Samoan and to ensure that I support our Pacific and our communities.
Well, excellent. Well, Honourable Pesetatamalelagi, Barbara Edmonds, well, have a safe trip.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I can tell you about how it all went.